The skies had turned red over the desert planet of Carentha. Dust storms raged in the distance, and the burnt smell of plasma and steel still floated in the air. Corporal Mason Thorne stood at the edge of the destroyed battlefield, holding his helmet under one arm. His armor was scorched, scratched, and cracked, but he was alive. He didn't feel victorious. The Galactic War had ended just 3 days ago. One final push from the Allied Human Command had crushed the last stronghold of the Varelians, an alien empire once feared across multiple systems. Their warriors were fierce, their ships were fast, and their queens were known for ruling with sharp tongues and sharper claws. And yet, now they were finished. Mason walked through the remains of what was once a Varelian palace. Blackened stone, broken walls, and twisted metal framed the ruins. This place was beautiful once now, just a ghost of its former power. He didn't expect to find anything useful. But orders were orders. Clear the zone. Secure all survivors. Process all rewards. He hated that word as Mason turned a corner. His boot crunched on a shattered crown. He paused. A soft sound reached his ears like chains. Weak movement. Breathing. He stepped slowly forward, weapon low but ready. Then he saw her. A girl, no. A young alien woman sat against the wall, her wrists bound in golden cuffs, her long white hair dirty but glowing in the soft light, filtering from the broken ceiling. Her eyes were closed at first, her face pale, thin, and bruised. But when she opened them, Mason froze. Her eyes were bright blue, piercing, intelligent, and full of fear. She didn't speak. He slowly lowered his rifle and raised his hand. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." Her eyes flicked down to his boots, the emblem on his shoulder, Human Alliance. Her breath caught in her throat. Then, very slowly, she nodded. She tried to speak, but her throat was too dry. Mason pulled a small water pouch from his belt and gently offered it. She took it with shaking hands, drinking slowly like she hadn't tasted water in days. He looked at the collar on her neck. It had glowing Varelian rune slave markings. Her royal-looking outfit was torn, but still full of detailed gold patterns, crystal inlays, and soft glowing threads. She wasn't just anyone. "Who are you?" Mason asked softly. She didn't answer right away, but finally whispered something. In a voice barely louder than the wind, "Lyrian." The translator chip in Mason's helmet kicked in. Her name was the same in both languages. She wasn't lying. "Are you a noble?" She gave the smallest nod. A strange silence followed. Mason didn't know what to say. He was just a soldier. He wasn't prepared for this. But he did know one thing: he couldn't leave her here. "Called it in," the command replied quickly. "Subject Lyrian is a classified Varelian royal. Per Section 47, any high-value alien discovered post-war is considered property of the soldier who finds them. She's yours now." Mason stared at his cum. "What?" "You heard us, Thorne. She's your war reward. Don't argue. That's protocol." He looked back at Lyrian. She was watching him now, not with fear, but something else. Curiosity? Suspicion? Or maybe she was just too tired to care. "I didn't ask for this," Mason muttered. "Doesn't matter. That's your problem now." The cum cut out. Mason sighed and walked closer to Lyrian. She didn't flinch as he reached for the collar. With one sharp twist of his knife, it came off and dropped to the floor with a soft metallic sound. She looked at him, confused. "You're free," he said quietly. But she didn't run. Instead, she stood slowly, even with the golden cuff still glowing on her wrists. She looked at him straight in the eyes. "Then why don't I feel free?" Mason had no answer. All he knew was that something strange had just begun. She wasn't a prisoner anymore. But she wasn't just a prize either. And deep in his gut, Mason felt it. This girl, this alien princess, was going to change everything. Not just for him, but maybe for all of humanity. Asterisk. The desert winds howled through the ruined halls of the Verelian Palace as Mason helped Lyrian step over broken stone and twisted metal. Her steps were slow, unsteady, but she walked with her chin held high. Even covered in dust and bruises, she looked royal. Mason didn't speak much during the walk back to the extraction point. He wasn't sure what to say. Every time he glanced over at her, he saw something strange in her expression, like she was watching the world for the first time with new eyes. She didn't seem afraid anymore, just silent. "Can you walk all the way?" he asked softly. Lyrian looked at him, then gave a nod. Her voice came out rough and cracked. "I will not. Crawl." They walked in silence across the sands, their shadows stretching long under the sinking sun. Drones buzzed in the sky, scanning for remaining threats, but the war was over. No more enemies. Just wreckage and ghosts. Mason's communicator crackled. "Again, you still with the alien girl, Thorn?" "She has a name," Mason answered coldly. "Lyrian." There was a pause on the other end. "Right, well, Lyrian's being added to the post-conflict transfer log. You'll escort her to the resettlement zone. New orders. Copy that." He looked at the girl beside him. Her silver-white hair glowed softly in the evening light. She said nothing about the orders, though her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the mountains cut the sky. "You ever been off this planet?" he asked. Lyrian paused before answering. "I was born under glass domes. I've never seen so much sky. I never thought it could be real." Mason looked up. For a second, he forgot she was from a race that had once tried to wipe out his people. He forgot she was supposed to be his reward. Right now she was just a young woman, finally seeing the open world. They reached a broken outpost by nightfall. The fire Mason built crackled gently, sending sparks into the dark sky. He handed her a thermal blanket and ration pack. She sniffed it once and raised an eyebrow. "It smells like metal and boredom," he smirked. "It's military food. You'll live." Lyrian sat across from him, folding her legs with perfect posture, her golden cuffs catching the firelight. "Why didn't you leave me there?" she asked suddenly. Mason stared into the fire. "Because I couldn't." "Couldn't or wouldn't?" He sighed. "I don't know. Maybe both." Lyrian's eyes didn't blink. "You humans confuse me. You win a war, and instead of killing your enemies, you claim them as prizes. That wasn't my choice." "No, but you still accepted me." "I didn't accept you," Mason said, a little sharper than he meant to. "I saved you. There's a difference." For the first time, something softened Lyrian's expression. She looked down at her hands, slowly removing a golden ring from her finger. It had the Verelian Royal crest on it, a mark of power that no longer meant anything. "I was supposed to be married to a Verelian warlord last cycle," she said. "To strengthen the Empire, I refused. That's why they caged me." Mason frowned. "They enslaved their own?" She gave a bitter smile. "Royal blood means nothing if you speak against the council." The fire popped loudly. Mason felt a chill despite the desert heat. "You're not going back to them," he said. "I know," Lyrian whispered. Mason stood and looked toward the stars, now beginning to shine above. "Get some rest. We move again at dawn." Lyrian watched him for a long moment before wrapping herself in the blanket. Her voice came soft and careful. "Mason," he turned. "Thank you for not treating me like a thing." He gave a small nod. "You're not a thing, Lyrian. You're a person. I don't care what protocol says." As he turned away, she looked into the flames, her thoughts drifting across the galaxy. The war was over, but something new had just begun between them. And neither of them fully understood what it meant yet. By morning, the winds had calmed, and the desert looked peaceful, almost beautiful, under the soft orange light. But Mason knew better. Peace in this galaxy never lasted. He and Lyrian walked toward the pickup zone in silence, their boots crunching softly over sand and stone. A transport shuttle waited for them ahead, dust swirling around its landing gear. Soldiers stood near the ramp, rifles slung over their shoulders, armor polished. But they didn't look at Mason. Their eyes were locked on Lyrian. He saw it in their stares: curiosity, judgment, and something darker. She noticed too, lifting her chin like a true princess. Her torn dress, glowing cuffs, and pale beauty made her look like a strange treasure they couldn't understand. One soldier smirked. "Nice reward, Thorn. Hope you keep her well behaved." Mason's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Lyrian's voice was calm, but sharp. "Do all your warriors speak like beasts?" The soldier's smile faded. Mason stepped forward. "Back off. She's under my protection." They didn't argue, but the air grew cold. Mason led Lyrian into the ship, avoiding more eyes. Inside, the shuttle's engines hummed. She sat across from him, her posture perfect even on the rough metal seat. She looked at the cuffs on her wrists. "Will they ever remove these?" Mason shook his head. "Not unless I request it. Technically, they're keyed to my ID now. Like a pet collar. It's not right," he said quietly. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want you to be treated like this." She watched him carefully. "Then why haven't you taken them off?" Mason didn't answer. The truth was he was afraid. Not of her, but of what would happen if others found out. He was just a corporal. If someone higher up thought he wasn't following orders, they could take her away. And he'd seen what happened to war prizes taken by command. Lyrian leaned back, her voice softer now. "You're not like the others, but you are still part of their system." Mason didn't deny it. The shuttle soared into the sky, leaving behind the broken sands of Carentha. Through the window, Lyrian watched the desert disappear. She didn't smile. When they landed at the resettlement zone, things were worse than Mason expected. Dozens of alien captives, most female, many young, stood behind energy barriers, watched by guards with cold eyes. Human officers barked commands, and small drones flew overhead recording everything. A woman in uniform approached Mason. Her badge read, LT, Ray. She looked at Lyrian with barely hidden interest. "So this is the Varelian Royal?" she asked, her voice too cheerful. "She's called Lyrian," Mason said firmly. "Cute. She's being transferred to private holding for observation. Command will want to question her before she's released to civilian ownership." "No," Mason said without thinking. "She's under my care. I'm using my rights as her assigned guardian." "LT," Rayan narrowed her eyes. "You sure you want that responsibility? These ones don't adapt well. They fight, they escape, some even try to seduce." Mason glared. "She's not a weapon. And she's not some prize to show off." Ray smiled coldly. "Suit yourself, Corporal. But remember, you break her, you replace her." Lyrian's expression didn't change, but her fingers clenched. That night, Mason sat in his assigned quarters, bare metal walls, a cot, a storage crate. Lyrian sat on the edge of the bed, arms crossed, staring at the cuffs again. Without a word, Mason reached into his pack, pulled out a small tool, and knelt in front of her. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm taking them off." "You'll get in trouble. Let them try." He worked slowly, carefully bypassing the code, until with a soft click, the cuffs dropped to the floor. Lyrian stared at her bare wrists, touching them like she couldn't believe it. Mason stood. "You're not a slave, Lyrian. Not to me, not to anyone." Her voice was quiet. "And if your leaders come for me," he met her eyes, "then they'll have to go through me first." For the first time since they met, she smiled. A small, fragile smile, but real. And Mason knew, in that moment, she was no longer just someone he saved. She was someone he'd fight for. The next morning, Mason and Lyrian stood at the edge of the resettlement camp, watching the line of new arrivals being processed like items instead of people. The guards barked orders, scanners beeped, and alien girls were forced to strip off jewelry, hair decorations, or even family sigils. Each step they took made Lyrian's expression grow colder. She whispered, "This isn't peace. It's another kind of war," Mason agreed. He had been told the war was over, but it didn't feel like it. His orders were clear: keep her quiet, keep her contained, and report anything unusual. But every time he looked at her, he saw more than a refugee. He saw strength, anger, pride. Later that day, a civilian from Human Central Command arrived at the camp, an older man in expensive robes, hair slicked back, smile full of false kindness. His name was Ulrich Voss, a merchant official who had grown rich during the war by reassigning alien assets. He walked straight toward Lyrian and Mason, smiling too wide. "Corporal Thorne, I've heard so much about your prize. Varelian royalty. How exciting. She could fetch quite a price on the upper worlds. I have clients, noble clients, who would pay millions for someone like her." Mason stepped forward. "She's not for sale." Ulrich chuckled. "Oh, I think you misunderstand. Everything here is for sale. Especially the leftovers of war. That's how peace is built, soldier by trading the pieces." Lyrian's eyes narrowed. "My name is not leftover, and I am not a thing." Ulrich turned to her, amused. "Still speaks like a queen. How adorable." Before Mason could react, Lyrian moved fast. She stepped close, eyes locked with Ulrich's, and said one word low, sharp, and in her own tongue. His face changed. The smile dropped. She had said a name that meant something. Ulrich took a step back. "Where did you hear that?" "I am that," she answered. "The last daughter of House Ralvis." Ulrich turned pale. Mason looked between them. "What did she say?" "She's lying," Ulrich muttered, voice shaking. "That house was destroyed, wiped out." Lyrian lifted her chin. "You burned our temples. You shattered our star cradle. But you didn't kill us all, and now one lives. Right here." Ulrich turned to Mason. "If that's true, then she's not your prize. She's a political threat." "She's under my protection," Mason said firmly. "And she's done nothing wrong." Ulrich's voice turned dark. "You're playing with fire, Corporal. You think you're protecting her, but all you're doing is putting a target on your back. I'll report this. Do what you want." Ulrich stormed off, and Lyrian finally breathed out. Her hands trembled just slightly, but her voice was steady. "That name. I haven't said it since I was a child. I thought it would be forgotten forever." "What does it mean?" Mason asked. She looked at him. "It means I'm not just a noble. I'm heir to a throne. One that your people destroyed." Mason didn't flinch. "And what do you want now? Revenge?" She shook her head slowly. "No, revenge is for the dead. I want freedom." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we'll find it, together." That night, they didn't stay in the camp. Mason made a choice. He quietly packed his gear, erased their tracking tags, and snuck out past the watchtowers with Lyrian by his side. They moved through the canyons under cover of night, the stars watching silently above. He wasn't sure where they were going. All he knew was that they had to disappear before the system found them and dragged her back into chains. She looked at him as they moved through the rocks. "You know what you're doing is treason." "I know." "And you'd risk everything for me?" Mason gave her a tired smile. "You were never just a reward to me, Lyrian. You were a warning, a reminder. And now you're something more." She looked away, but her voice softened. "Then let's run, before the stars forget who we are." The desert night stretched endlessly before them, each step echoing in the silence of their escape. Mason had been trained to move in hostile territory, but now he wasn't moving as a soldier, he was a fugitive. And beside him walked a former alien princess, barefoot on cracked stone, her long white hair glowing under the twin moons of Carentha. They traveled through dry canyons and ancient ruins, sleeping under broken ceilings and eating whatever Mason packed before they left. Lyrian never complained. Her spirit burned quietly, like embers waiting for wind. But peace didn't last. By the third night, Mason spotted a black drone circling far above. It hovered too long. It wasn't a patrol drone, it was a hunter. They found us, he said. Lyrian didn't ask how. She just tightened the stolen cloak around her shoulders and started walking faster. Then we don't stop. But it wasn't that simple. The next day, as they climbed down into a narrow ravine, Mason heard a sharp sound, boots crunching gravel. He signaled Lyrian to hide behind a pillar of stone. She obeyed instantly. Two shadows appeared at the top of the ridge. Human soldiers. One of them carried a plasma rifle slung across his back. The other scanned the area with a tracking visor. "Thorn's trail ends here," one said. He wiped his ID, but the girl's cuffs left a faint signal before he broke them. "He's smarter than they said. They always say that. Doesn't matter. Orders are clear, dead or alive. And the girl, high-value asset. Priority 1. Mason's breath caught in his chest. So they weren't just tracking him. They were planning to kill him if needed. And Lyrian. She wasn't a political concern anymore. She was a target. He waited until they passed, then grabbed Lyrian's hand and pulled her deeper into the canyon. They ran silently, weaving through tight turns and ducking beneath stone ledges. She didn't ask questions, she trusted him now. When they finally stopped, hidden inside a collapsed Varelian temple, Mason fell to his knees and opened his bag. Lyrian watched him reload his weapon, her eyes narrowed. "You're preparing to fight. They won't stop," he said. "Not until they take you or kill me. You could leave, go back, say I escaped. They might forgive you." He looked at her and shook his head. "I didn't walk through war just to leave you behind." Something passed between them in the silence. No words, just understanding. She sat beside him on the cold stone floor. This temple, it belonged to the Starsong matrons. My people believed it was where dreams were born. Do you still believe that? "I want to," she whispered. Mason leaned against the wall, watching the dim light above. "Then maybe this is the right place to start dreaming again." That night, they slept under the broken dome of the temple. Stars flickered through cracks in the ceiling, painting their skin in soft light. For the first time, Lyrian reached out, placing her hand gently over Mason's. Neither of them spoke, but something was changing. No longer protector and prisoner. No longer human and alien, something closer, something real. And far away, beyond the hills, a team of assassins adjusted their scopes and prepared to move in. Dawn crept slowly across the temple ruins, soft golden light shining through the cracks in the stone. Mason awoke first. His hand was still resting beneath Lyrian's, her fingers curled gently around his. For a moment, he just stared at her. How peaceful she looked when not surrounded by fear and fire. But peace was a cruel illusion. A sharp sound snapped him alert. Nettle against rock. He rolled to his feet and pulled his rifle just as a plasma bolt blasted the pillar behind him. Stone exploded. Lyrian jumped up with a gasp, and the temple echoed with shouting. Eyes on the target. Confirmed Varelian female take. Her alive. Mason didn't hesitate. He grabbed Lyrian's hand and dragged her behind cover. Another bolt hit the floor where she had been standing a second before. "We have to split up," he said, breath heavy. "They want you more than me. If I distract them, you can run." "No," she said firmly. "We stay together. There's no time." But she was already moving, picking up a shard of glowing stone from the old temple wall. With a flick of her wrist, she activated an ancient Varelian defense crystal embedded in it. A barrier shimmered to life between them and the attackers, weak, flickering, but enough to block the next bolt. Mason stared in shock. "You knew this was here?" "I listened to the old priests when I was a child. I never forgot." The shield wouldn't last long. Mason took aim from behind the glow and fired. One of the black-armored hunters fell. The others ducked and opened fire, pinning them down again. The barrier flickered. The crystal cracked. Lyrian, when it drops, we move. Left, not right. There's a ravine edge there. They won't expect it. She nodded. The next second, the shield collapsed in a flash of sparks, and they sprinted together. Plasma fire chased them through the dust. Mason shoved her behind a rock, turned, and fired 3 rounds. Another enemy fell, but he took a bolt to the shoulder. He stumbled, gritting his teeth. Lyrian reached him instantly. "You're hit." "Just a graze," he lied. She pressed her hand to the wound, glowing symbols forming around her palm. It was an old technique, Varelian biostabilization touch. Mason gasped as the pain dulled. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked. "My mother. She healed soldiers who were never meant to come home." Mason blinked through the pain, then pulled her down as more shots flew past. "We need to end this, fast." She looked at the remaining soldiers advancing. Her voice was low. "Then let me." He looked at her, confused. But then, she stood up from behind the rock. "Lyrian, what are you doing?" She stepped into the open with her hands raised, but not in surrender. Her voice rang out like a royal command. "Enough." The soldiers paused. She spoke in her own tongue, sharp and powerful. The translator in Mason's helmet struggled, but one word kept repeating, "Heir, heir," and then one of the soldiers froze, lowered his rifle. "You're her," he whispered. "The last flame?" Lyrian nodded once. "You swore to House Ralvis, do you now? Shoot your true ruler?" The man's hand trembled. His partner looked confused. "She's bluffing," the other soldier shouted. "Orders are orders." "No," said the first. "That name is sacred. If it's her, we can't kill her." Mason raised his rifle. "Then leave, now." The two turned and disappeared into the rocks. No more shots came. Silenced. Mason stared at her, breathing hard. "You just ended it with words." "No," she said softly, walking back to him. "I ended it with truth." He leaned back against the rock, bleeding but smiling. "Remind me never to argue with you." She knelt beside him, carefully pressing her hands to his side again. "You saved me first. Now I return the favor." As her hands glowed softly, Mason felt the warmth spreading through him, not just in his shoulder, but in his chest. Whatever had begun between them was more than survival now. They moved quietly through the canyon paths, Mason limping slightly, but steady on his feet. Lyrian stayed close, her hand brushing against his arm from time to time, not by accident anymore. Her expression had changed. No longer afraid, no. Longer guarded. There was trust in her eyes now. And something more. After escaping the last hunters, they headed toward the neutral zone near the edge of the Carentha system. If they crossed it, they would be outside Human Command's reach. But there was one last checkpost, an old listening station turned civilian hub, crawling with scouts, smugglers, and spies from every species. They knew the risks. As they reached the outer gate, Mason adjusted the old cloak around Lyrian's shoulders. "You sure about this? Once we go in, there's no turning back, no military protection, no citizenship, no name, just U.S. Lyrian gave a faint smile. "That sounds like freedom." Inside the hub, it was chaos markets full of shouting voices, alien tech being traded, stolen artifacts on display, even food stalls offering meat from unknown creatures. But nobody paid attention to them. Not here. This was a place where secrets lived. They met a fixer named Den, a half-mechanical merchant with one glowing red eye. He looked Mason over and raised an eyebrow. "You military?" "Used to be," Mason replied. "Now I'm not anything." Den pointed to Lyrian. "And her?" "Also used to be something," she said herself. "Now I'm just free." Den grinned. "I like you two." They exchanged information. A freighter ship was preparing to leave for the outer colonies, a place where names didn't matter, and no one asked questions. But just before they boarded, a message came through on Mason's old unit that it was from LT Re. I know where you are. I know what you're doing. If you run, you'll be labeled a traitor for life. But if you bring her back now, we'll forget everything. Mason stared at the message. Lyrian saw the hesitation in his eyes. You can go back, she sighed quietly. They'll take you in, fix your record, give you a medal, maybe, and leave you in a cage again. You wouldn't be the first. He took a breath, then dropped the unit on the ground and crushed it under his boot. I'll be the last. They boarded the freighter. Hours passed as the ship slowly rose through the sky, up into the stars. Mason stood beside Lyrian near the observation window, looking out at the galaxy ahead. He wasn't a soldier anymore. She wasn't a royal. They were just two people on the run, maybe, but finally alive. You know, he said, I never thought the war would give me anything but scars. Lyrian turned to him, her voice soft. It gave me you. He looked at her. She smiled, truly, freely, beautifully. The girl who had once been chained to a broken palace wall now stood beside him, wrapped in starlight, no longer afraid, and somewhere far behind them, the old world burned quietly in the distance, too, far to reach them now. The galaxy didn't know it yet, but a new story had begun.